I'll Follow You Down is a science fiction drama that tells the story of a family who must deal with the disappearance of a father and husband and the son's journey to find him. The movie starts with a man, Gabriel White, playing chess with his son, Errol. He tells his son, who is sad about his father leaving, that he will be back from the conference soon, and they will continue their game then. Later, they leave for the airport, with his wife, Marika, and son dropping him off. Marika kisses Gabe and asks him to call when he lands, but he never calls. The next day she tries calling him, but in vain. When they both go to the airport to pick him up, they keep waiting, but Gabe never arrives. She gets super worried and calls the hotel where he stayed, and they tell her that he is not there, but his luggage still is. She then calls her dad, Sal, and he tells her that they were supposed to have lunch together, but Gabe never answered the calls, and he just assumed that he was busy. After the call ends, Sal goes to the hotel and only finds Gabe's luggage. After doing all she could to find her missing husband from her home, Marika goes to Princeton. Her father takes her to the place where he last saw Gabe. She looks around and finds his wallet and phone in a drawer. They look for Gabe everywhere they can. They talk to the people on the campus, but all their work is futile. Years pass, and Errol grows up without his father. He still gets nightmares about his father's disappearance. In the morning he goes to the class, and his grandfather, Professor Salvator, is teaching. Sal says that he does not know what to do with him because he never shows up on time, but still aces each and every one of the exams. He gives Errol an equation and asks him if he can solve it, and he replies that he could, but he needs a few hours. Sal is shocked by his grandson's answer because it took him weeks, not hours, to solve it. He then takes Errol to show him something, nervous and excited. He shows him an accelerator and tells him that he thinks that Gabe time traveled to the year 1946 to meet Einstein, but was never able to come back because something might have happened there. Errol asks why he is telling him all this after all this time, and he replies because he can't do this alone and needs Errol's help. Errol does not believe his grandpa and asks if he has told his mother and begs him not to tell her because she is already disturbed. Later at night, at Errol's place, Sal begs him to think about what he said because he has been working on it for years and everything he says is based on evidence. He then thanks Marika for dinner and leaves. Marika, who is clearly disturbed and depressed after stopping her medications, asks Errol if he ever thinks about his dad because they never talk about him and she would like to talk about him. Errol replies that he remembers playing chess and going to the movies with his dad, but he does not really remember what he looked like or how he sounded. She says that she thinks about the night Gabe never came back. She thinks that maybe he fell in love and wanted a life away from them. She cries and says that she wants to know what happened to him, what happened that night. But Errol says that it does not make any difference because his father is gone and leaves. Marika doesn't like what her son said, takes it to heart, and ends it all. The next day Errol wakes up and finds Marika's body in her bed. He considers himself responsible for her loss because he said harsh words to her. At the cemetery, overcome with grief, he requests Sal to show him his father's research. He gets obsessed with finding his father and starts working with his grandfather, even neglecting his girlfriend, Grace. With the passage of time, Errol researches all he can and finds out that his father was murdered by someone in the past. Grace, suspicious of his work, arrives at the lab and asks what he is doing. He tells her what he found out about a corpse who was unidentifiable, and he thinks that the victim is his father, and that he needs to somehow stop this from happening. Later at night, Grace expresses her concern that she is worried if he brings his father back everything will change, and maybe they will not end up being together. He tries to calm her down and reassures her that no matter what happens, they will be together. Annoyed that he does not understand her, they fight because she thinks that their life is perfect, and she has no idea what he wants to correct by bringing his father back. When he doesn't respond, she tells him that she is pregnant, and infuriatedly asks him how he is going to correct this. The news of him becoming a father hits him deep, and he starts contemplating his decisions. He goes back down to the basement and starts calculating the possibilities of them still being together, even after he brings his father back. Grace comes down to the basement and asks him what he is going to do now, but he replies that he does not have any idea. With some hope in her eyes, she asks him to stop, but he says that he cannot. Disappointed with his reply, she leaves. The next day, Errol asks Sal about the possibility of him and Grace being together in the new timeline. But Sal tells Errol to let go of all these distractions, that all he needs to focus on is to make things correct, not to develop an ideal life for himself. Sal then appreciates him, telling him that he is doing great. He just needs to stick to it until they are successful. Later at the lab, Salvator finds an infuriated Errol, all because he cannot solve an equation. When he offers to help him, Errol gets angry and barges out of the door. Not knowing about Errol's whereabouts, Sal calls Grace to ask about Errol, but she snaps and says that he is the one who planted the idea of correcting everything in his head, so why does he care, and hangs up. In the middle of the night, Errol wakes up and finds Grace with her bags all packed. She asks him very gently if he had ever thought that his father was meant and their life was meant to be like this, without him. With her eyes welling up, she asks him if he succeeds in his experiment, would he be able to recreate the soul of their baby in the new timeline. And when he doesn't reply, disheartened, she starts to leave. But he stops her and promises her that he won't do this experiment ever again. The next day, Sal tells Errol that Errol was only 15 years of age when Marika tried to take the easy way out of this mess for the first time. He tells Errol that it was never supposed to be her life. But Errol tells him that this time, it is his child's life that he needs to protect, so for the sake of his own family, he would not be working on the theory anymore. Errol tries to move on with his life by selling his old house and buying a new one with Grace. But Salvador continues to work on his theory of time travel and correcting the mistakes of the past. Grace and Errol are happy about starting their new life, but fate has decided something else, and she suffers a miscarriage. Errol gets heartbroken at the loss of his unborn child, and with this new heartache, he again starts working on the mystery of his father's time travel. He finally finds a way to go back in time. He tells Salvador that he will go for his father, and show him what damage he did by traveling back in time. Errol gets ready to go back in time, wishes Grace goodbye and leaves. He travels back to the year 1946 to find his father. Back in the year 2000, after getting off the plane, Gabe goes to the place where he sets up his time-traveling machine. He gets into the machine and travels to the year 1946. He gets out and starts exploring the area, but this time is followed by Errol. Gabe goes to Einstein's house and is told by his neighbor that he is on his Saturday morning walk, so he decides to go to a diner down the street and wait for Einstein there. At the diner, Errol sits down next to him and starts asking Gabe about his life and judges his expressions. He, in return, tells Gabe that he is researching wormholes and that his name is Errol. He tells Gabe that his father went missing when he was 9 years of age and his mother did away with herself. Gabe recognizes his son and is overjoyed to see his little boy all grown up. They both go back to the storage room. He asks Errol what happens to him, and he replies that he is murdered for money. He asks about Marika's passing and mentions the fact she never listened to anything that would have the potential to change their lives. Errol complains that they did not sign up for what happened to them, and that Gabe has to decide this time, either his family or this discovery. Gabe, who is a family man through and through, says that he will always choose his family. Errol tells Gabe that he is the only one who can fix everything and make things go back to normal, so he promises that he will and hugs his son. He says that he just needs a few more days and he will avoid being attacked this time, but annoyed that his father is not listening to him, he fights because he needs his father to go back at that very moment. The movie ends with Errol telling Gabe that if he loves his family even a tiny bit, he will go back immediately. Seeing his own son threatening him, he agrees, and to keep everything in balance. Errol, heartbroken at losing his son, Gabe cries over his body, but because of the promise he made, he gets up with determination and goes back home. At his home, in the year 2000, he is warmly welcomed by his sweet and loving family.